hope you're all keeping really well, and welcome to my video about books that surprised me. So obviously when you go into a book, 9 times out of 10 I'm going into it, I think I'm going to enjoy this, but there's sometimes that I'll read a book where I'll start reading it and I'm like, maybe not, I'm not quite sure where this is going, or I'll think I'll like it but then I end up absolutely loving it and I just wasn't expecting that. So yeah, today I'm just going to take you through a few books that I've read that I either wasn't too keen on, or and somebody said, oh no, give it a try, you might like it, or it's something that I sort of decided to continue with on a whim and then I ended up absolutely loving it. So yeah, let's take a look at some of the books that surprised me. I mean, the first one that came to mind when I thought of doing this was Deep Light by Frances Hardinge. Harding? I'm really bad at pronouncing things. And this was a book that I picked up obviously because of the fantastic cover and things. It's got bright orange pages and the premise sounded really interesting about this sort of seaside sort of community and how the gods of the sea used to be sort of real but then they died, and now people go into the ocean to sort of fish for their remains, and then there's magic in the sort of bones and organs that they sort of find. And then one day these two friends sort of find their own piece of a god. It's an old heart and it sort of gives them the ability to start healing people, and they sort of start using it for monetary gain and things, and everything kind of goes from there. And it's a really, really fascinating, setting and idea, but for some reason, the good first chunk of it, I was just finding it so difficult to read. I don't know if it was with the writing style or, the friendship is actually an example of quite a toxic friendship, and I think I found that actually quite difficult to read personally. So yeah, it took me months because I just put it down and forgot about it, and then I sort of picked it up and I went, no, I'm going to finish this, I'm just going to get to the end. And then all of a sudden it just picks up and it just gets so good, and now I absolutely love this book. I really want to reread it, and it was just such a good book, and the sort of three characters that you end up following are really interesting, and I just think that just the setting and the community and the descriptions of the sort of the sea and the undersea and things is just amazing, and the history and the lore that you find out is really fascinating, and yeah, just such an amazing surprise that I, was basically hating this book and then now I absolutely love it. Then the book that I was a bit unsure going into was The Raven Boys by Maggie Stiefvater. Now this is one of my all-time favourite series now, but when I first, I think, picked it up in the shop and I read the back, I sort of went, oh, the character's name's Blue, and it's all about sort of forbidden love, oh god, this is just going to be one of those. So I kept sort of looking at the cover going, oh, it's interesting, picking it up going, oh shit, that looks terrible. And then I think I just saw perhaps some booktubers talk about it, or one of my friends was reading it, and I thought, right, let's give it a go, let's see what it's about. And as I said, one of my all-time favourite series, because I remember reading that book and then going out and then buying the rest of the series and reading it over a weekend because I was just that into it. I was not expecting to be as obsessed with that series as I am now, and I go back to it all the time, I reread it all the time. There was just so much more to that story than I was expecting from the blurb, and I'm very, very glad that I picked it up because it was just incredible, and as I said, one of my favourite series ever. On a similar note is going to be City of Bones by Cassandra Clare. Now obviously in hindsight, I don't really like that book really much anymore. These sort of incestual themes is really just bothering me now, but at the time, I knew from my sister that they weren't related, so I was kind of why I could read it, even though I was just like, oh. But I really didn't just love the setting and things, I kind of overlooked the romance aspects to just be in on the other stuff. But I remember, first of all, looking at the cover and then reading the blurb, which was like a really bad blurb for what the book's actually about, if I'm being honest. It just sounds so generic and tropey. I mean, it is, but it was still so enjoyable for me. I got really into the sort of Mortal Instruments and the Infernal Devices and stuff for a few years, and yes, there's plenty of problems with them and stuff, but for a good chunk that was like my favourite book series, and I just really wasn't expecting it at all from the cover and the blurb, as I said. And I just got into reading it because we were at my stepmom's for the weekend and I'd sort of run out of the books I'd read, and my sister had just bought those because we'd been out that afternoon. And when she finished City of Bones, I thought, oh, I'm really bored, I've got nothing to do, I'll start reading this as well. And yeah, absolutely fell in love with it at the time. And yeah, I just was not expecting that at all. The other thing is going to be the manga Claymore, which is one of the few mangas that I own all the volumes of, and B, will reread and like sort of, you know, see, you know, read in person. You know, there was a few mangas that I did read all the way through, but that was like on online sites, which are, you know, not entirely illegal. And yeah, so I had sort of my anime phase sort of when I was about 14. And I think it was because I started off by watching Attack on Titan, and just after that, you know, because if you watch this the first season and stuff, you know the cliffhanger ends on, it kind of really just leaves a bit of a hole, sort of like, well, now what am I going to watch? Because it really is very good. So I think I typed in, you know, what to watch after you've done Attack on Titan sort of thing. And then Claymore came up because it's sort of, you know, similar sort of premise about, you know, sort of human eating monsters and stuff, and there's a big mystery. And I did watch the anime, and if you've watched the anime and read the manga, you'll know that the anime catches up and then tries to finish, whereas then the manga then goes on for like another 14 volumes or something ridiculous like that. So yeah, so I watched the anime and I was a bit disappointed because I'd absolutely loved it so far. There's loads of fantastic female characters and the friendships they all have. And so then I decided, okay, maybe I'll give the manga a go. And I just sort of, you know, started just buying the volumes and stuff. And yeah, once you get to the point where the anime stops but the manga continues, it just gets so good. From like I said, the character relationships and the arcs that they all go through and the development all these women go through. You know, there's a 7-year time skip. You find out so much more about the creatures and stuff and the history of the world that they live in and things. Like, it's just one of my favourite mangas, and I don't think I was just not expecting as well for it to be as much of a favourite as it has ended up being, just because, you know, it was just something I watched just to sort of like fill the hole after this other anime, and yet I think I now love it more than I ever liked Attack on Titan. So yeah, huge surprise. Another one's going to be The Handmaid's Tale by Margaret Atwood. This was a book that I actually had to do in 6th year at school for higher English. We had to, you know, analyse it and stuff. And usually if a book's being picked by school, it's going to be dull as fuck. And, you know, even like, you know, some of the shorter books I struggled to get through, whereas this was like a proper novel. But no, loved it. I thought it was such a good book. I completely understand the hype. I do really want to watch the TV show as well. Like, I meant to watch it back then, because that was like 3-4 years ago now. But I just haven't got around to it, but I think it is now on, you know, for a free service that I might be able to do. So I think I'm definitely going to try and watch the show, because I did really like the book. I thought the themes were really interesting, and yeah, it was just a really good book. And again, just such a surprise, because I was expecting, I think just because it was a book for English, that I was going to absolutely hate it. Last year I also got to read The Light at the Bottom of the World by London Shah, and this was just a book that I just picked up on a whim. I thought the cover was cool, and yeah, again, really loved it. It's sort of set in a sort of, you know, the sea water's, you know, completely risen and things, and humanity now lives just completely submerged. It's really just an interesting setting, and I just absolutely loved it. I wasn't expecting to love it at all. I thought I'd enjoy it. You know, I thought I'd like it, but I didn't expect to enjoy it as much as I did. But I did. I really liked it, so definitely a huge surprise. On a similar vein is The Witch Hunter, which is a book that I just picked up because sometimes I go through phases where I just want to read sort of like witchy books and things. So this is a book sort of set in sort of like England during the witch burnings and things and the witch hunts, but like obviously, you know, it's a sort of fantasy world sort of inspired by that sort of time. And you follow Elizabeth, who is a witch hunter, but then once she gets accused of being a witch herself, and then sort of gets rescued by lots of different witches who don't know that she's a witch hunter, and she just starts to uncover that there's perhaps more to the witches than she's been led to believe. And yeah, it's a really interesting book. And whilst it's not the most amazing thing I've ever read in my life, you know, I was surprised by just how much I enjoyed it and how much I do actually love this duology, because yeah, it got me out of a reading slump, and it's just one that I can definitely see the faults. I won't, you know, praise it up as this most amazing book, but at the same time, I'm sitting here like, yeah, I really like that book. Earlier this year I started the Fire Seer trilogy by Robin Hobb. I started Assassin's Apprentice back in January, and I've just finished Royal Assassin last month. And yeah, again, just, you know, it took me a few chapters to get into the writing style, to get into, you know, how descriptive and quite sort of lengthy it can be at times, but yeah, again, just absolutely love it. I wasn't expecting to. I was sort of, you know, a bit apprehensive going in, because a lot of people told me, oh, well, you know, it's not really what you expect from a fantasy, it's a bit slower, it's a bit, you might find it a bit boring, but no, I absolutely loved this style. I loved the pacing. I just thought it was so good and so different from anything I've read so far. I mean, yes, it's set in the sort of medieval sort of timing, you know, that's obviously quite common for fantasy, but just the pacing and the things that go on I just thought were fascinating, and I was not bored in the slightest. And the next one's going to be Starfish by Kemi Dawn Bowman. So this is a YA contemporary that just follows this girl who is trying to get into art school, but then because she really wants to get away from her emotionally abusive mother, but when she doesn't get into the college she wants to get into, she doesn't really know what to do with herself, and her abusive uncle is going to be moving back into the house, and she just has no idea what to do with herself. And then her childhood best friend turns up and offers to stay with him in California, and she can look around art schools there, and she could just sort of get away for the summer, and then kind of kicks off from there. And yeah, so I joined this sort of YA book club a couple of years ago, and we read this book, and we also read Summer Bird Blue, because the author Kemi Dawn Bowman was actually going to be coming to our session that month. So yeah, and I for a long time didn't really go near contemporaries or anything. I basically just stick to fantasy because I know that's what I like. I don't tend to enjoy contemporaries a lot of the time, and if I do, I prefer them to be mysteries or thrillers or something. But yeah, but these were the books we were reading, and I absolutely love these books, and Kemi Dawn Bowman is now one of my all-time favourite authors. I'm going to be reading everything that she puts out. Just such a surprise. I had no idea that I was going to be so in love with this book, and particularly this book in particular, because it really touches on some stuff that I can relate to a lot. And yeah, just such a surprise that, you know, if I hadn't gone to that book club, I would not have found out about, you know, one of my all-time favourite authors and favourite series. Another one's going to be A Good Girl's Guide to Murder. This was a book that I, you know, after my book club, I just picked up a book in the bookshop to take with me on my train back home, and yeah, this was just what I happened to pick up. I think I'd seen it advertised a little bit, and again, loved it. I love this series so much. I've just finished the second one as well, and I'm just absolutely head over heels in love with this series. And considering this was the book I picked up on a whim, just as a, oh, I'll do my train ride home, you know, love it so much. This is such a good book and such a good series. I cannot wait to find out how this trilogy is going to end later this year. Another book series that I wasn't expecting to love as much as I did is The Invisible Library by Genevieve Cogman. This is a story sort of about this interdimensional library, and the main character is a librarian who basically acts as a spy, and they get sent out into all these different alternative worlds to steal books and bring them back to the library. And it's such a nuts world building. Like, I've spoken about this in so many videos. You're probably getting sick and tired of me talking about this series, but I just love this series so much because, you know, the first couple of books, this is the second book. The first book's The Invisible Library, then you got The Masked City. And the first couple of books are like, okay, they're setting up the concept, they're setting up the characters, they're sort of going through the motions. You know, each book kind of almost acts as a standalone, so, you know, whatever the sort of plot is for that book is sort of confined to that plot, and the only things that sort of overarch are sort of, you know, the relationship between our sort of two main characters and friendships they have with other characters, as well as just, you know, previous plot points sometimes have effects on things that happen in later books and things, but, you know, on the whole, you could basically jump into any book of this series and you basically get explained to you what's happened previously. So like, it's a really interesting sort of idea in that format. And yeah, as I said, you know, I picked up The Invisible Library because I thought that sounded like such a cool concept, and after reading it, I think I gave it like 3 stars, so, you know, that usually means that I enjoyed it, but, you know, I didn't love it, and I'm not going to be raving about it. But I just decided, you know, I was at book shopping, and I happened to see the second book, and I thought, okay, yeah, I'll keep going, you know, I am enjoying it, you know, it's fun, it's short, it's a really interesting idea. And similar with Masked City, again, I was just sort of like, you know, it's alright, it's good fun, I like the plot, I like the characters, but I'm not loving it. The dialogue can be a bit weird at times, I can't quite put my finger on it, but sometimes it's a bit sort of forced at times, but, you know, most of it's fine. There's just like some like little dialogue things that I'm like, that feels shoehorned in a bit weird. Like, you know, I wasn't, like I said, it wasn't really sitting with me, I wasn't rushing out to get the rest of the series. And then when lockdown hit last year, I was doing a lot of painting and things, and I kind of fancied listening to some audiobooks, so I sort of finessed Audible for free books and things. So I managed to get 2 free audiobooks with my account, and then my mum let me use her account to get 2 more free audiobooks. So I decided to continue listening to The Invisible Library because I thought, well, if I'm just getting them for free, I don't really want them to be books that I will want to go back and reread because, you know, I won't really have access to them after this month, yada yada. And yeah, and then just from The Burning Page, which is the 3rd book onwards, I was absolutely hooked. on this series. Like, I can't even put my finger on why. Like, I just love the characters, I love the world building, it's completely nuts. Because it has everything. It has dragons, it has fae, and in this book series the fae are like the embodiment of literary tropes. And then the more, you know, dragons are creatures of order, fae are creatures of chaos. The more chaotic a world is, the more likely the reality around them is to change to fit the narrative that they believe themselves to be living through. Like, it's really hard to explain, but they've got, you know, dragons, fae, dragon-fae politics. The library's sort of neutral sort of stance. There's vampires, there's werewolves, there's magic in some. You know, like I said, there's lots of different alternate worlds. So, you know, they go to one alternative world where it's like steampunk Victorian era London. You go to another one that's like, this one it's sort of like Venetian, you know, masks in Venice and things. There's another world where everything's similar, but there's magic and Russia's the ruling power and all the sort of politics that come with that. There's 1920s Prohibition America sort of world. And as I said, each story has its own like plot. So you've got this one's a rescue mission. The first one's, you know, there's another one where the library's under threat. There's another one where there's like a murder mystery that they get involved in. There's one that's a heist story. Like, it's just such a just fun series, and I just wasn't expecting it. Even when I was reading this one, I was like, I had no idea what was going to go on in the rest of the series and how much it was actually going to become one of my all-time favourite book series. Another one's going to be The Girl King by Mimi Yu. This is a book that I picked up in a charity shop last year, so, you know, I didn't really look up what it was about apart from just the sort of blurb. I thought the cover was really cool, and yeah, and I really liked it. I thought it was a really, really good book. It was just one that I happened to spy in the charity shop when I was out, and I really, really enjoyed this book. It follows two sisters, and the elder one, being the daughter of the emperor, is sort of led to believe that she'll actually be able to take over when he dies, and, you know, which is quite uncommon because usually it goes to the male line, but she's sort of been led to believe that actually he is going to let her take over. But then all of a sudden it's announced that she's going to have to marry her cousin and he's going to be the one to take over and she'll just be his wife, and she sort of decides, no, I'm going to put my foot down, I want to fight for my right to be emperor, and everything kind of goes from there. And it's just such a good book, and I really, really enjoyed it, and it was just such a fun surprise after just sort of picking it up just on a whim for a couple of quid in the charity shop. And I really, really like this book, and I cannot wait for the continuation of this series. And last but not least, I'm going to go to show you Blackwing by Ed McDonald. This is a book that I picked up from my library a couple of weeks ago. I just finished it the other day, and I don't know if it's just because the rest of my reading month has been so mediocre and a bit shit that, you know, this is going to be the first good book I've read all month, but I loved this book so much, and I wasn't expecting to. I was sort of a bit unsure as to whether I would like it, but my god, I love this book. I loved the world building. I thought the characters were so interesting. I thought all their relationships were fascinating. I loved the magic system, and just the stakes just kept escalating, and yeah, my god. I'm going to have a review coming out for this, I think, next week, so I'll try and put more cohesive thoughts into that. But it's such a surprise that I loved this as much as I did, because I really wasn't expecting to. And yeah, I think that's it for today. So those were a list of books that I was surprised by. Have you read any of these? Were you surprised by them as well? Or just tell me, what books did you go into not expecting to really like that you ended up absolutely loving, or ended up as one of your favourites that you really wouldn't have been able to guess just going in from it? Finally, just let me know about books that you have been surprised by down in the comments, because I'd love to hear from you. See if we compare, and see if we can compare if you've read any of the books that I've read or I've read any of the books that you've read. But yeah, but thank you so much for watching again. Definitely feel free to leave a like and subscribe to this video if you like the sort of videos that I come out with. But thanks so much for watching, and I'll see you next time.